Hello? Okay, because I've been around for 20 years, thank you, Don. I have seen, let's not get discouraged, because I've seen a lot of changes throughout our 20 years. Just going back to like when we had domestic violence, there was never domestic violence 20 years. It was called what? Family violence. An order of protection was a piece of paper. Police would come in, couldn't do a thing about it because you need to separate you, you go and walk around the corner, the person would come back. This was in 1994, we had changes. So now it's domestic, it's got a label on it. This is gonna sound sad, but I am so happy to see that we have human trafficking laws, okay? We never, then, when I used to work with sexual abuse victims, they would come in and they would tell you how they were abused when they were a child and they felt they were damaged goods. So when someone ever came to them and they felt, well, no one else is gonna want me, when a pimp or somebody came to them, they were very vulnerable to why not, if my family has been having sex with me for all these years, what's the difference? We also call it sometimes survival sex, that's what we used to call it, is if they had no place to live, no food, there was no family, no nothing, and if so somebody showed them a little act of kindness, or they needed shelter, or they needed food, and they already were abused all their life sexually, what's the difference? They had no self-esteem. They had nothing. They had no goals like some of us had. No family to encourage us to go someplace. Who do you think gets up in the morning and says, I think I want to be a prostitute? Anybody you know? And I bet you ask your prostitutes, do you think that's what they wanted to do when they were born? To be raised to be a prostitute? No. You know, so I'm so happy to see that we're going to start looking at a prostitute as a victim. Because if you talk to these prostitutes, I guarantee they have been sexually abused, or they have no family. That's why that person, the prostitute who was found dead, who's going to ask for where she is? No one. She's, you know, like, who's going to say she's missing? No one. Who's going to stand up for her? No one, because she had no one. And these people, these pimps or these people, they know how to groom somebody. It's like a pedophile. A pedophile doesn't start in, or sex abuse doesn't start in and raping someone. They groom that person. The same thing with the prostitute, you know? And so to know that our penal law is starting to look at that and look at these prostitutes as victims, and I was saying, when Emily was saying that this prostitute may come in a couple times and go back, just like your domestic violence victim, the same exact thing. A domestic violence victim goes back how many times? 7, maybe 8 times. Because there's a relationship there, whether it's bad or not. That's still a relationship, okay? And we have to be there. It's very frustrating sometimes, I know, even for law enforcement or for prosecutors, when you see somebody and you know they're gonna get hurt and you're afraid for them, but they choose to go back to that situation, we have to make sure that we don't have that judgmental, that, oh, here they come again, you know, oh my God. And we have to make sure that we're still that non-judgmental person when they come back for that 5th time, to treat them with the respect that they deserve, that they are worth something that they've never heard before. I'm fortunate that I'm a victim services, so that's all I work. It's all we work with is just the victims of domestic violence or sexual violence. The fortunate thing we have here in Oneida County is we have a really great working relationships with the district attorney's office. We have a great group and we work together. That's another thing. 20 years ago when I started out, no one worked together. The police were the police, child protectives were the child protectives, DA was the DAs. It doesn't work like that. You can't. You have to work together. You have to have a multidisciplinary team for their victim. It's not going to work if we do individual stuff, because the district attorney has to do what they have to do. The police have to do what they have to do. And as victims, if they want a good witness, we have to try to build that person up so that they are going to be known that that's okay. I worked a lot with children, and a lot of times people would say, oh my God, you're gonna put a child on the stand? But I bet you sometimes if you do it the right and you have a good prosecutor, that child, that would be an experience for that child that's not gonna be harmful. It's gonna be a positive to know that that child did something. And that's why I think that the young lady over there asked about law enforcement. We have to get out there and teach law enforcement about sensitivity and about some of the things that they need to learn. And we're starting to do that now. Kara told you about some of our courts. We also have a domestic violence court now. Whoever thought that that would happen? That if somebody came in the courts, we would have them. You know, we have liaisons now with law enforcement. So things are changing, and I can say that because I've been here for a long time and have seen it evolve. You know, so and I know that Emily talked about New York City, but let me tell you, it's here. Okay, it is here. I also have, as part of the YWCA, we have what's called New Horizons. New Horizons is a transitional program for young ladies from 16 to 21 years old. Every single one of those girls that come in here, 50–70% of them have been sexually abused. They're throwaways and they're runaways. Are they targets? You bet. Have they given sex out? You bet. But at least they have a place to go. Okay, they have a safe place. We try to work with them to build up their self-esteem. But remember, this is 16 years old they're coming into me, okay? They have a foundation now. And now we have structure. We try to give them positive, saying, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to go to school. You need to make yourself better. There is a goal for you. Sometimes they leave, they'll come back, you know? But they know that there was a place where we can plant a little seed into those young girls. It's out there. And I know that Emily said it's the women and the girls. I bet you that the boys are out there too. I know they are, but they're not going to come forward, just like with sexual abuse or domestic violence. A lot of times a man or a boy will not come forward and tell you exactly what's happening to them. We're very fortunate that in the last couple of years we did have John Bosco House now, that is another transitional program for young boys, 16 to 21 years old. But it took a while to get that program, but now we do have that program for young men too, because it is happening to them. I just don't think they're coming forward, you know, and there might not be enough, but the services are very important, because if we're gonna start doing this, we darn better have services for these women or these boys when they are found out. Because what are we going to do then? They better have a place to go. And I think as a community, you know, we have it here. We need to really work together on how we're going to add to some of our services. And, you know, it starts with us. We're a community. Just like working with a multidisciplinary team, we have law enforcement, we have, you know, district attorney's office, we have service providers, but the community is also important too. If you know somebody, if you think you know somebody, just be out there for them, be supportive, because that could be the first step. You may be the first inkling of knowing what's going on. It might not. They're not going to just go to law enforcement and go, hey Les, I'm a prostitute, can you help me? It's not going to happen. But you may know somebody, you may offer them some hope, or just say, you know what, here, call this hotline, or do something, you know. So we really have to know it is in our community. Don't think it's just New York City. It is here in Oneida County. And our services are, what we, at the Y, we have a hotline, 24/7. We have, if somebody goes to the medical, if there's a sexual assault victim or domestic violence, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we get called to the hospital. We are there for their sex victim. Okay, we will stand through the whole medical procedure. If there's something with police and they want us there, we would be there for that person. We are there from the very beginning, once we're called, to the very end, and that's even after the end. We will be there to do follow-up, and that's important. That follow-up is just as important as when they get through all the systems. Because sometimes it's when, it's like, this is kind of morbid, but like even after when you have someone who passes away, you're so busy with everything, okay? The funeral arrangements, all that, but then what? A week later, what happens to us? Whew. You know what I'm saying? Everything just, you have the time to think about what's going on and everything, and it kind of fall apart. These people, that's the same exact thing. Everything happens, you know, you first you get arrested, you get the court stuff, you get all this, you get all that, then all of a sudden if it's done, you start sitting, you know, oh wow, that follow-up is very important. I still have girls that call me from working with them, and they'll call you, tell you how they're doing, you know, and it's just so good to know that they are doing. I just had, you know, or even some of my sexual assault victims from way back. You know, when you see them, you know that they're okay. You know, so I think it's important, and you people can be just as important if you know it gives people support to know that they're there. Because if they don't have family, sometimes you are their family, maybe their only family, to know that they're okay, that they are a person. You don't deserve that, but if they don't know that, they're going to continue to think that way. And I think a lot of our sexual abuse young people, I worked with this one person, and it was when I was working with the DA's office on a case, and it was a young girl. She was 10 years old, and her stepfather had sexually assaulted her. So we were going through the proceeding, and the district attorney had to do their stuff, but there's always a waiting period because you have all these other things going on. So as an advocate, I could sit with her. We played cards, and we were just sitting there talking. And she was sitting there, and she was sitting there, and she was just talking, and she says, if I just didn't sit on his lap, this wouldn't be happening. Right? What is she thinking now? This is what she's thinking. It was her fault. And I just looked at her, and I go, honey, you have a right to sit on somebody's lap without having anybody touch you? She goes, yeah? I go, yeah, So I didn't think much of it because we go on and on. As you can see, I talk all the time. So we're just sitting there playing cards, and and didn't think much of it. She got on the stand, and she did an excellent job. When the defense lawyer asked her, well, how come it took you so long, young lady, to come forward? And she looked at the lawyer and said to him, well, my sister's 8, and I thought if that's when he did it to me, that he was going to do it to her. Out of the mouth of babes, she blew that away. So that just goes to show you that, right? So we're sitting there, her and I were sitting there, and they brought him down in handcuffs. We didn't know he was going to come down that way. And he looked at her, and she goes, see what I did to you. See what you did to me. And she looked him in the eye, and she said, you did that to yourself. So I knew all my blabbering did get to her, and I knew she was going to be okay because she finally saw, and I was able to tell her it wasn't her fault. So these things are important. Even when you're prostitutes, I guarantee you when you talk to them, they're thinking that something happened, it was their fault. So we have to correct that. That's why I love our Child Advocacy Center, because we're able to reach the young people, letting them know it's not their fault. And when you look at a prostitute, if you look at why they're doing it, it's not because they're getting a lot out of it, okay? They're not. And I think that it's the only way they know. It's almost like being brainwashed, and they have no goals. They've been no education, no nothing. So I think that as the crisis services director, and seeing now that we're going to start prosecuting some of this stuff, we have to get on board, and I have to look at my services and see how we're going to expand them. But also as a community, we have to start looking at what we can do as a community. Anything else? Anybody got a question?
What do you think went wrong, or what could they have done better in the case of the policeman's wife in Deerfield?
I'm not sure. Yeah. So I think that not from that, just that one, but what we're doing is we have a coalition. It's called the Oneida County Domestic Violence, Sexual Violence Coalition. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to get a review team, because this is not the only domestic homicide in Oneida County. In the last year, I think we've had maybe 3, okay? So what we're going to do, I talked to Dawn from the DA's office, and I talked to our local law enforcement, and we're going to get a review team together so that when we can look at some of our domestics and see if we can prevent this from happening. Sometimes there may not be anything, but we're going to look at our agencies and see what we can all do better so that hopefully this doesn't happen again, okay? Any other questions? Any other? Yes.
As I sit here listening to all of you, the main thing that comes into my head is, okay, so they come and they get their confidence back, and I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And if they have no place to go,
Right.
to live, when they leave there, then they go back because they have no place to go.
Exactly, yeah. And that happens all the time. That's like in our DV shelters. We also now have a transitional program.
Oh, that's the other thing, the funding for all of these things.
Yes,
That's
right.
what hit me in the head.
Yep, you're right. They have to have some place to go, because why not? Yes.
So who's going to,
Oh, well, I'll add that to our list. I'll add that to my list, I'll bring that back like everything else. I mean, Barb can attest to this, that with New Horizons, we have New Horizons, or even with my shelters. But then we went a next step, and now we have transitional programs through HUD funding. So now we do that. Now I have another thing on my agenda, so I may be here for another 20 years. Okay? Thank you very much.